Welcome to Homeschooling Outside the Box, the podcast that encourages and equips moms who homeschool an outside-the-box child. Hey there, I'm Cindy Renna, and I hope you are having a fantastic February. I have been wanting to get on and record a podcast for over a week now, but it has been crazy here. We are in North Alabama, and we have had some weather, which we don't always get, so it's been very exciting. We've had snow. We actually had a little accumulation last night. I know there's storms ripping through all of the U.S., but we have had ice, and we've lost internet, and everything's been closed, and it's just been a little bit crazy this week. So I'm so happy to finally be on and be speaking with you guys. I've got an awesome interview coming out next week that you will have to look for, but today I'm actually going to pick up where we left off with homeschool rhythms. I'm hoping to get to do one a month this year, so it should take me all year, but this is going to be the little series I do this year in 2021, trying to help you guys with your homeschool rhythms, because really that is like the breath in your day. It is what can help get you back on track. It is what can give you the confidence that you're educating your kids in a way that it works for your family, and that you're sort of on the right path where God wants you to be as a home educator. And so they can really be some good markers in your day to help you stay on track or to help you get back on track if you get off. So, all right, today we are going to pick up with narration. If you're new to the Charlotte Mason homeschooling community, you've probably heard narration, the word thrown around a little bit. It's not something necessarily used outside of the Charlotte Mason community that I'm aware of, but I think once we get going here and I tell you more about it, you will find that it's super simple, and it's a really, really great tool to have in your toolbox for homeschooling, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So, all right, if there is a quintessential practice in Charlotte Mason's approach to education, I would argue that it is the act of narration. So you can pick and choose what living books you read. You can use watercolors or not in your nature journaling. You can dictate your own routine in a way that best fits your family, but you simply cannot reap the full benefits of Charlotte Mason's approach without narration. So what is narration? Narration is the art of knowing. Most simply stated, it's the act of telling or showing back what you have heard in a way that is authentic to you. This isn't about parroting back the last sentence or idea of a paragraph. It's about processing the information you've received and delivering it back in a meaningful way. Charlotte Mason said, "If you cannot tell, you do not know." Narration is a challenging demonstration of true knowing, and it makes things like multiple choice questions or comprehension questions or other sort of testing things unnecessary. There are two types of narration: oral and written. Oral narration can begin around age 6 or 7 when your child begins formal studies, but most children orally narrate as soon as they begin to speak. I'm sure you see this in your own home. Your child will see a lovely butterfly and come tell all about it. She'll listen to a book that you read aloud, and later you'll find her acting out the story with her dolls. Narration is a natural human form of expression. When we've enjoyed something, we're compelled to share it. In A Philosophy of Education, Charlotte Mason said, "It is true that we all read and that narration is as natural as breathing. It's valued depending solely upon what is narrated." With oral narration, the child tells back the story in his own words. Some early narrations are only a sentence or two long, but they will grow over time with gentle encouragement. To mix things up, your child could also draw a picture, act out a scene, build a clay model, make a chart, or do a number of other creative expressions. Written narration begins when the child is able to write out his thoughts. This is around age 10 or whenever developmentally appropriate. If you have a child who struggles with writing, he can dictate his narration to you or create a sophisticated illustration. we have really enjoyed using Storyboard That. It's a digital storytelling tool for some of our written narrations. And as always, I'm going to have links in the show notes. So if you want to know more about that, check out the show notes. Now, with older children, you are working on composition skills as well as comprehension capabilities. So as your child is able, encourage him to write what he can. In the beginning, written narrations are similar to early oral narrations. They're short and often not very detailed. But be patient. As your child grows in this practice, his narrations will grow and develop too. Now, narration is one of those things that is easier said than done. And because of its simplicity, some people doubt its efficiency. If this is you, I would challenge you to try narration yourself. It's a lot harder than you think. Narration requires a lot of work from our kids. They have to listen to what we're reading or that they've read, understand it, and then figure out how to put their thoughts into words in a productive way. If they're doing written narrations, you have to add, the fine motor skills required and the eye muscles and the hand coordination and spelling things right and grammar and all the other things. It takes time for them to get good at this practice, but as the saying goes, practice does make perfect. So over the years, I will tell you, I have had the privilege of hearing my kids go from one-sentence narrations to vibrant discussions and short essays laced with personality and insights. Okay, so how to include narration in your school day? Well, narration is used for all of the reading that's done. So that will cover most of your morning time and group subjects. And if your child is independently reading for history or another subject, that would be included too. And as they get older, it is important to work that skill of having them read a selection and then be able to process it and produce a narration from it. So some curriculum like Apologia actually includes narration in their lessons, and I know there's others as well. I personally don't ask for narration with literature or poetry because I always want the kids to correlate that type of reading with pleasure and not productivity. So here's how it looks for oral narration for us. First, we do a brief recap. So I will ask the kids to tell back what happened last time or to help jar their memory with a leading question if they can't remember. Second, I read a short passage from one of our books. In the beginning, short might mean a few sentences or a paragraph. As they grow in the habit of narrating, you can stretch them to a page and finally a chapter. By exam week of that term, your child should be able to tell back about a book or a particular topic from a broader point of view. I will also add here that it is absolutely essential to pick a quality living book. I have a link to that in my show notes. If you're like, what is this about living books? What is a living book? Go ahead and check out the post that I wrote on that. But remember, it's supposed to be enjoyable. So a really well-written book that everyone enjoys will make narrations easier. If you're continually getting poor narrations, you might need to evaluate the book that you're using. So number 3, I ask the kids to narrate. So I do this by prompting with simple phrases like, who wants to tell back? Or tell something about ancient China, or Homer, or David's repentance, or Mozart's childhood. Or I could say something like, does that remind you of another story that we've read? And so on. So it's important to note that you should never interrupt a narration, and you should teach siblings to respect each other by not interrupting either. Yes, this means you hold your tongue even if they get a detail wrong. Nobody likes a nitpick, and you can mention it later if it's something substantial, but when a child is narrating, it's important to let him have the floor. As Charlotte Mason said in A Philosophy of Education, corrections must not be made during the act of narration, nor must any interruption be allowed. Number 4, capture or expand upon the information. So if it's relevant, we'll take time to put details into our timeline book or look at a map for a deeper understanding. Many times, little discussions will break out over a topic or a story that we read, and if there's anything that needs to be further defined or explained Now is the time. And number 5, I do a teaser for next time. So I'll end the reading and ask, oh, what do you think is going to happen next? Or at the very least, I will tell the next chapter title or topic. So for example, I might say, and next time we read the story of the golden apples. So doesn't this sound similar to the way an addicting miniseries works? We just can't wait to see the next episode. And dear listener, if you are my age, you will remember the torturous days before binge watching when you had to wait a whole week to see what would happen next. So we want to create the same appeal with our stories. By refreshing our child's mind on what happened last time, and then reading a new selection, connecting with it in a personalized way, and then wondering ahead, we give them that full and layered experience with the story. Remember, the goal of narration is not to quiz your child to see if he was paying attention. His response will prove whether or not he was. But our goal is more meaningful than that. The real goal is to see how your child is assimilating the information, or in other words, how he is making the knowledge his own. Narrating has launched many vibrant discussions as a family and led to deeper questions and exploration. We continue oral narration when we read aloud as a group, even after the children are doing written narrations. And speaking of, now let's talk about how it looks for written narration. So number 1, the child reads an assigned section from a book that he's reading independently, or I will request a written narration of material that we covered during group work. So a little side note, if I know that I'm going to ask them to write about it, I don't require oral narration after the reading. Number 2, the child writes his narration in a spiral notebook. So I begin with encouraging a few sentences, and then eventually you want to move up to a few short paragraphs. And number 3, I read the narration later on, although I don't check it per se. I'll make a couple of positive comments or notes, and sometimes mention one thing that they could improve upon or correct the spelling of a word. But I keep it very simple. So you can begin by requesting 1 written narration a week. As your child improves over time, you can add to that. My son is in year 8, and he does 2 written narrations per week. We will eventually bump up to 3 or 4 as he gets into high school. As your child gets older, the requirements can get more complex too. So instead of just telling back, you can ask him to compare this idea to another idea, or explain a concept, or research deeper, or write a persuasive argument, or you could even ask him to present this idea in poetry form. So there's a lot of ways that you can work composition skills in the high school years. Okay, now for the connection between narration and attention. So if you're familiar with Charlotte Mason's habits, you know this is in her top 3 of habits that you want to help train your child in. So she insisted on a single reading before narration, not just as a time saver, but for the sake of your child's attention span. This was an intentional connection. Narrating after a single reading is like a little workout to help strengthen your child's attention span as well as other mental muscles. So Ms. Mason felt so strongly about this that she devoted 2 of her 20 principles to the topic of narration, and one of them explicitly addresses the habit of attention. So in Principle 14, she says, as knowledge is not assimilated until it is reproduced, children should tell back after a single reading or hearing, or should write on some part of what they have read. And Principle 15 says, a single reading is insisted on because children have naturally great power of attention, but this force is dissipated by the rereading of passages and also by questioning, summarizing, and the like. Acting upon these and some other points in the behavior of mind, we find that the educatability of children is enormously greater than has hitherto been supposed, and is but little dependent on such circumstances as hereditary and environment. Nor is the accuracy of the statement limited to clever children or to children of educated classes. Thousands of children in elementary schools respond freely to this method, which is based on the behavior of mind. Charlotte Mason. So note that rereading a passage can actually hinder your child's habit of attention. When you have a child who is already struggling in this area, the last thing we want to do is make it even more difficult for him. With this in mind, we'd be wise to do this little bit to help him. Charlotte Mason also believed that the habit of attention was a distinguishing trait of an educated person, a trait that is available to every student who works at it. First, we put the habit of attention, because the highest intellectual gifts depend for their value upon the measure in which their owner has cultivated the habit of attention. From Home Education. Of course, we don't want our children to know just for the sake of knowing. No one wants to raise a puffed up show-off. So all this knowledge gain must be to some end. In A Philosophy of Education, Charlotte Mason tells her purpose. The mind receives knowledge, not in order that it may know, but in order that it may grow in breadth and depth, in sound judgment and magnanimity, but in order to grow, it must know. And the practice of narration is what helps us all to know. Oral teaching was to great extent ruled out. A large number of books on many subjects were set for reading in morning school hours. So much work was set that there was only time for a single reading. All reading was tested by a narration of the whole or a given passage, whether orally or in writing. Children working on these lines know months after that which they have read and are remarkable for their power of concentration or attention. They have little trouble with spelling or composition and become well-informed, intelligent persons. Charlotte Mason, A Philosophy of Education. And now for an outside-the-box angle. I am fully aware that I am speaking to moms of children who struggle greatly in this area of attention, present company included. But don't panic. Even the child with severe ADHD or autism or dyslexia can grow in their habits of narration and attention. However, to strengthen anything, you've got to work at it. And just because something is difficult or because we start in the deficit doesn't mean that we won't or can't grow in that area, however that may look for each individual person. Our children with challenges can grow in their communication skills and in their attentiveness, and it's a gift for us to help them strengthen that area. If you're interested in any of the resources mentioned, please check out the show notes. I mentioned 2 books specifically that you might want to look into. One is A Philosophy of Education by Charlotte M. Mason. The other is Home Education, Charlotte M. Mason. Those are the 6th and 1st book in her Home Education series. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk with you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to Homeschooling Outside the Box. If you are loving the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a review. This is a great way to help other moms just like you find encouragement in their homeschool with their outside-the-box child as well. For more encouragement, be sure to head to cindyrenna.com and you can check out some great blog posts as well as a shop that will help equip you on your homeschooling journey.